Welcome back to Cover One, the podcast. I am your host, Erik Turner, and I'm joined by a full crew today. We got the whole team here, it seems. We have our newest contributor, Dan Lavoie. Dan, welcome to the crew. Welcome to the team, buddy.
Thanks. Glad to be joining.
Yeah, so kind of give us a background and where you come from. If people don't really know, I'll start off by saying, you're a contributor for Buffalo Rumblings. How long you been contributing there?
So I've been writing there for 3 years. I joined in the summer of 2014, and I've been writing and editing on Buffalo Rumblings for the past few years, doing general Buffalo Bills as well as NFL draft-centric writing, analysis, that sort of thing. So I've branched out and coming onto the Cover One team to kind of do the same thing.
Yeah, definitely. And you can expect his work, some Bills content, but another thing that we're going to be covering a lot more on the site is NFL draft content, some scouting some of these college players and, whether their fits in the Bills schemes on offense and defense. So definitely be on the lookout for that as far as Dan work goes. Kevin, back from vacation. How you feeling, buddy?
Dude, feeling great. Ready to get rocking and rolling on Thursday, man. Just feeling busy season for us.
Yeah, it's been a busy season for you, man. In July, you said you were hustling some fireworks for that whole month, man. You've been MIA, brother.
Yeah, man. Have some fireworks, making that summer cash, putting it away, focusing up on the Bills here now. So it's great.
Well,
it's great.
Welcome back, man. We're ready. We're happy to have you back and obviously contributing again. You put out a podcast a few days ago with Cole Thompson from Breaking Football. Very good coverage there as far as fantasy goes and just, players on our team, on the Bills team. And to hear it from another person objectively was kind of cool to hear. So
yeah, absolutely. It was a great podcast.
Good work with that one. Nate, what's new, buddy? How's life? How's the new condo there? What's new in Buffalo?
The weather's really warm, but I have air conditioning, so it works out fine. No, there's not too much going on. We're working on my roommate and I, Taylor, are working on some ideas for our podcast that'll be coming up pretty soon. Hopefully this week. Hopefully we're looking at a weekend start. We're getting Barbell to host us. Well, we're trying to anyways.
Oh, that's awesome, man.
So we're hoping to have a live podcast there during maybe dinner time, so that you kind of have that cool atmosphere there while we're recording. So it's got some cool stuff on the horizon, a lot of stuff going on, and obviously training camp starts Thursday. So my schedule amps up to about 80 hours a week of work. So let's go.
Well, kind of give the listeners an idea about your podcast, the name of it. It's going to be on Grandstand Sports Network, obviously. So kind of give the listeners an idea on what you're going to be doing with that.
Yeah, so my roommate and I are very we're sarcastic. We're very opposite people. He's a very hardcore conservative, and I'm a libtard, as people call us, I guess. But it's just each of us have a very unique take on sports, and most of the time we never, ever, ever agree. So we figured, we'd come up with something where we can incorporate doing the thing we love the most, which is drink beer and eat local food around the Buffalo, Western New York area. So we decided to, combine the two, and that's what we're going to start doing now. And we're pretty excited. I've got some good guests that are interested in coming on with us to sort of make it a fun experience. Obviously, we're going to kind of be out and about.
Right, and it does sound like it's a unique podcast, and we may have lost him there for a few seconds, but it's going to be cool because he's going to be going to different locations and doing podcasts there, talking about sports, talking about the beverages on hand, obviously. So that'll be cool to have on the Grandstand Sports Network, and that's the other big news. I mean, we're launching a network this week. It's called Grandstand Sports Network. Obviously, Nate's going to be involved in that, and Cover One's going to be on there. And so, it's going to be a unique experience in itself as well because, honestly, we're going to have – right now we have 13 podcasts and brands contributing. So, all their content, any content that they put out, it's going to come, to the network site. So it'll be unique, and it'll be really cool to have, not just Bills content, but you're going to have content from Philadelphia Eagles. You're going to have content from the Boston Bruins. You're going to have a little bit of everything. And, there are going to be characters. It's going to be fun. I think that the collaborative effort that Grandstand.
The Bruins, huh?
Yeah, the Bruins are going to be on there.
Get us with the Bruins?
Yes, yep. And, yes, it's going to be cool. Black and Gold Hockey podcast is a really good podcast. They have a really good site. Check it out. And we are launching this week. So that's the other good news that, we are launching that this week. But let's get to the Bills news, because that's what we do at Cover One. And the news as of this a few days ago is that Anquan Boldin is apparently has a visit set up with the Buffalo Bills. So I'll start off with you, Kevin, because I know you want to hit this hard. What are your thoughts on the Bills bringing him in, and what does it mean to the organization? Are you for it? You against it? What are your feelings?
I mean, I'm pretty vocal on Twitter that I'm very for the move. Now, more than just being for the move, I think most people would say Anquan Boldin still brings a little bit to the table, has enough veteran leadership, still does a lot with the community. One of the best guys you can be around for players. He's going to be around the new young wide receivers, and he's going to be a really big asset in the locker room. And we've lacked that a little bit over the last couple of seasons. So I think more than just whether you agree with signing the player or not, I think you can say that he'll come in a reasonable deal. I don't think at this stage he would be getting more than, I would guess, between $2.5 and $3 million. Maybe you guys could have more input on maybe his dollar value, but that's kind of where I would place him. Outside of that, the biggest thing to me is, why are you bringing in a guy to just continue to go 7-9, 8-8? I know he adds some stuff to the locker room. He adds some stuff off the field, like I've mentioned. But to me, I think it's a full win now move. I don't think you make that move. You take snaps away from Zay Jones, Andre Holmes, some of the other guys. You want to see who you have, and you're going to bring in Anquan Boldin to immediately come in and compete. That's step one. Step two, to me, why I'm hitting it so hard is, why would Anquan Boldin sign with the Bills to just pedal along at 7-9 and 8-8 again, like he did with the Lions? I think there's more there. I think that's a very good sign for the team and where they're going. I really do.
Nate, what are your feelings on this, bud?
I mean, in terms of situational football, I think obviously the lack of wide receiver depth has been pretty noted, really kind of all season, but all off season. I mean, but I think maybe people weren't specific enough about where the need was, and I think the need was in that slot. And as the screen you just pulled up before, showing a little bit about his slot targets, I think he brings that steady hand of being a really fluid, nuanced route runner, especially over the middle of the field. And right now you have a lack of depth at the tight end position, and I think this is maybe a move to move their offense to a little bit more of a modern 3 wide receiver set, where you're not going to have 2 tight ends, because right now they just don't have, I don't think, the depth at tight end where you're going to want to have a lot of 2 and 3 tight end sets. So what do you do to combat that? You get a guy that can run the same routes and kind of create the same mismatches that a tight end can, but gives you that kind of touch of a veteran wide receiver who, as Kevin mentioned too, can kind of give some off-field leadership as well to a guy. I think he could be very similar to him in Zay Jones, because Zay's not the kind of guy that's going to be a world burner, that's going to blaze 4.3 speed, but what he is going to be a guy that can do is run good routes, create separation, and kind of attack the high point of the ball. So yeah, I mean, I think that the move makes sense, but specifically of where the need would go is in the slot. I really like it in that term. So
yeah, definitely. And you can see the numbers here, slot performance wise. Overall his targets last season in Detroit were 88 targets. So he was targeted, 16% of their time in their offense. A lot of those targets did come on third downs when they needed those first downs. But you could see it on the screen, his slot percentage. He was in the slot almost 83% of the times and targeted 65 out of those 88 targets were from the slot. So he is primarily a slot player, and I don't expect that to change much if he were to come to Buffalo. And he did produce. I mean, he had 47 receptions in the slot and 7 touchdowns. And if I filter this, 7 touchdowns from the slot was the second most for receivers in the NFL that took 50% of the snaps from the slot. So
he's with some good company there.
He's in really good company. So Dan, what do you like about Boldin? What else he brings to the team, whether it be on the off the field? Are you for this move? Do you think there's a really good chance that he may sign?
So I think what's a real nice benefit of them bringing Anquan Boldin in is it really reinforces the whole theme that the Bills have been adopting since they hired Sean McDermott and the coaching staff that's supporting it. And that's that they're trying to build up kind of a culture with strong teachers, strong learners, and really strong leaders. And I think that Anquan Boldin would be a great example of a really great veteran who's been there. This is like his 15th season in the league, and he'd be somebody who could come in and really teach some nuances to some young players like Sammy Watkins and Zay Jones, and show them how veterans approach the game and kind of the ideal way to go about this. And I think that's where the mutual interest might be, is McDermott's hoping that he can get a player with that kind of caliber to come in, and he only has another year or two left in him, so just look for somebody who can show them the ropes, but also he has that ability to produce on the field. I'm not sure if they're going to end up coming away with a contract. We've seen a couple visits so far this season where they've come in, they've had dinner, and then gone their separate ways. We're still kind of waiting to hear if Gary Barnidge is coming to Buffalo. He's still around, but no one signed him yet. And obviously we had that Jeremy Maclin thing earlier this year, and that didn't pan out. So I think it'd be a good thing if they can get Boldin in there. I'm not too worried about a lack of snaps for Zay Jones at this point. I think they'll find a way to get him on the field. But I think Boldin would really upgrade the offense.
I agree. And Nate, you kind of touch upon the points that I would make. I do think that, we do need another receiving tight end. Do I think O'Leary can, withhold those snaps? Yeah, I do think that, he can catch some balls out of the backfield, and he's a good moving tight end. But I do think that, our offense has to be in 11 personnel a lot more, especially with the pistol and gun, just because of our run game. So I do think that having a Boldin like that, that's going to lighten the box, because he can run those ins and outs in the short to intermediate area. And what kind of defenses do we see a lot of? We talk about this all the time. We see a lot of zone. Well, guess what? Boldin gets signed. He's the number one receiver on our roster that knows how to read coverages. He's been there in the big game. He knows how to read coverages better than anyone. If he gets signed, which I do think there's a good chance he does get signed, honestly, guys, because, we're approaching camp. Camp starts tomorrow. So, I do think that there's a good chance he does sign. Now, he could be just using as leverage, yeah, but I do think there's a good chance just because of the timing. I think he's running out of time. Usually a guy like him with, only a year or two left probably in his career does wait this long, and I think Barnidge is playing that card as well. But I do think there is still a good chance. If he's coming to Buffalo to visit the first day of camp, I think there's a good chance that, at least the numbers are right. At least the numbers are right. Come here. Take a look at our offense. Look at the playmakers we have. Look how you could open it up, this offense, and help our passing game. So I do think it's a good chance for him to sign. And either way, bring him in. And I'm not worried about, Kevin, you kind of touched upon taking away snaps. Nothing's guaranteed. As much as I love Zay Jones, what happens if he gets hurt and we miss out on Boldin? As a coach, if you approach it from a coaching standpoint, you get the best players on the field and go from there. They'll find ways to get Zay, the ball. And you know what? Honestly, he's going to suffer some growing pains anyways, in an NFL offense. So we need to temper that a little bit as well. But it is a very good point. Yes, I'd like to see those young guys get the snaps. But you bring a guy like Boldin in, I think you kind of push that to the wayside, guys.
And Erik, more than just kind of needing to get Zay Jones snaps, it's more that you're fitting in a veteran, an older veteran into the offense that you're expecting to win now, right? With a move like that, it isn't necessarily that Zay Jones wouldn't struggle, more that it is that you're limiting his snaps. I think those are very valuable snaps to a guy like we were talking on our last podcast. He's the number one guy in terms of where our future is. We don't know what the future is with Sammy Watkins, right?
Sure.
So if you're going to limit even 20 to 30 snaps, 40 snaps, 50 snaps, less even total over a season, you're hampering some growth there.
Sure, definitely. And I totally agree with that. He's a guy that he needs those snaps. He does. You're right. But again, I think a lot of these guys, that's what I love. Like I said today on Twitter, I love the group that they're bringing in to camp. And this will kind of transition into camp because that wide receiver position is one that we've talked about a few times. And I like the group that they're bringing in, the Keel Shorts, Brandon Riley. They got Streeter, Andre Holmes. Andre Holmes, I think, is going to surprise a lot of people.
Don't sleep on Philly.
And Philly Brown. I like this group. Dan, I'll swing it to you. We'll start with the receiver group. What players do you like off the top of your head as far as the receiving group, and take into account the offense that we're going to be running this year?
So one thing that I really like about the free agents that they brought in was Andre Holmes. I think we saw some really good potential in the red zone last year, from Tyrod throwing to Justin Hunter, where he was able to find kind of a taller target and make some production out of a player who hasn't really succeeded up to this point.
Right.
Andre Holmes at 6'5", 208 is in that same kind of prototype of Justin Hunter, where he's a big athletic guy. And he's been more productive than Hunter during his career. And so I like the red zone matchups that Holmes provides. I'm also really excited about the two undrafted rookies that we're starting to talk about. One is Shorts and the other being Brandon Riley coming from Nebraska.
Right.
Each of those they have their own kind of Shorts as a slot option, and Riley is kind of the guy who can go up and catch the ball. Both of them are. I think what the Bills are trying to do with the receiver group is pick a player who's really successful in a specific a trait, and I think they're going to try to put them into a place where they can maximize their strengths and use that to kind of build up what's a bit of a motley crew. But I think they have the right pieces to kind of put that all together.
Now, what did you see on film with Riley that that would make him a fit in this offense? I'm not sure if you saw too much film on him over at Nebraska, but what did you see on film from him that makes you think he is a good fit for Dennison's system?
So I think what he brings to the table is kind of his concentration and his ability to reel in passes that are not necessarily ideally placed, especially when we're in kind of the first year of a West Coast timing offense where you're hoping to get precision, but Tyrod Taylor's not an especially accurate window passer. So I think what we're hoping for is that we can get somebody who can make it work, even if he's not given the most ideal pass. And I think that's hopefully what we get if we have to bring out Riley. He's the fifth or sixth option. So if somebody gets injured or we're going 5 wide, I like that we have somebody who you can rely on him to reel in the pass and find a way to get around the defender and still get his hands on the ball.
Sure. So Nate and Kevin, I'm not sure if you guys have seen a lot of film on Da'Keil Shorts, because I'm a big fan of Shorts. Obviously, I study both of those guys, Riley and Shorts. I do like Shorts. I don't know. Let me know your opinions on between the two receivers, if one were to make the roster or at least the practice squad, because I think at least one of these guys is going to make the practice squad. So we'll start with you, Kevin. What do you think?
I read a lot about Da'Keil Shorts out of right after the draft, and he was a priority free agent by most accounts. And I heard he had a lot of opportunity to go elsewhere, and he chose Buffalo due to the need at receiver at the time. I really like what he brings to the table. Haven't we been trying him at kick and punt return as well? Right. I think that's an option for him to sneak on the squad or at least find the practice squad. I think he adds that element. He can go over the middle, as we see on video here, and I like the way he plays. He didn't get a ton of opportunity at WVU, but a lot of people that cover them that I know personally said, watch out for him. I really like him to make your squad. So,
right. Nate, what are your thoughts on Shorts? Think he makes it?
Yeah, I think I agree. I just think a little bit more of a dynamic athlete, someone that, like as Kevin just said, did maybe get the opportunities that you would have liked to see. And I mean, that offense was kind of up and down last year. But no, in terms of if a guy's going to stick on, I think you're right. I think if one of these two guys sticks on, it's Shorts, and if they do, it's likely the practice squad. I do think that they've assembled a nice group of veterans at the wide receiver position at the depth. At least in depth purposes. I think a guy like Rod Streeter is an interesting name because I think what he brings is a similar sort of steady nature to the game that Andre Holmes is going to get you. I think he's a guy that can be a guy that does well in this offense. And I think you have a couple other guys too, as you mentioned, Philly Brown is going to give you that veteran sort of touch to the position too, that I think they have a lot of young guys. And I still think that they could use a receiver, and maybe this is why the Boldin move makes so much sense, to maybe sort of mentor Sammy Watkins a little bit, just maybe give him more of a veteran presence, because he just doesn't have that veteran receiver talking in his ear. I mean, how many of the great receivers always started with another legend or another great above them? Terrell Owens, it was Jerry Rice, and before that it's like Randy Moss had Chris Carter. So I think they need a veteran to sort of start to get in Sammy Watkins' ear, and maybe a little bit just a different approach to not only the game but how to prepare and how to be available. So just little things like that.
And that's what I love about this group. You mentioned it, Nate. You got the veterans, but not just veterans. You have veterans that are leaders, guys that have been, in tough situations, that have earned everything that they've, has gotten to them. And a guy like Streeter, another guy with Holmes that, didn't get many opportunities, but I do like his abilities in this offense specifically. I like his first step and his ability to, on slants, 3-5-step slants and in routes, which we do need to, upgrade as far as this offense goes. It's something that we didn't do a lot of. And then you can see on this play, he does offer, it does cover a decent amount of ground, on these type of called screens and whatnot, something, again, that we, also want to upgrade. So wide receiver position, I like the group that we're bringing. I think the consensus here is everyone kind of likes the groups that, that we're bringing here. and the talent of and balance of veterans and younger guys that are here to compete and earn their spots. So Nate, where do you want to go next with this camp primer? Where are we going next, Nate?
So I was interested in maybe moving down to the offensive line, guys, in a name, in a position, and sort of a rumor that has been going around that Vlad Ducasse, who was brought in free agency this year from, I believe, the Ravens, right? He played for the Ravens last year. It was a spot starter at the right guard position. Wasn't ranked all that high. I believe Pro Football Focus isn't flattered, isn't giving him a flattering ranking. I know in terms of not only starters, but just qualifying right guards who put up enough stats and have played enough time. So, but when I look at it, he knows the system. He knows Juan Castillo very well. He played under him last season and has played under him before. So he's maybe the guy that's going to benefit from the familiarity of the system. John Miller, to me, is a better fit for what they want to do, which is they want a little bit – John Miller is your most, I think, athletic offensive lineman at this point in terms of pulling. I mean, Richie's still a monster when he's pulling, but I think in terms of lateral quickness, movement, obviously age, Miller could be one of your, cornerstone offensive linemen for the future. I do think that he needs to take that third-year step. I don't necessarily think he took a step back last year, but I think maybe Ducasse is just the right sort of thing to maybe get the most out of John Miller, who maybe thought that there wasn't any reason for them to bring in a guy to replace him. He's young. He hasn't really been challenged yet. I think it's sort of maybe the perfect scenario for him to maybe maximize everything that he can be in year 3, which I think is really the pivotal year for every player coming into the league. It's that year 3. It's because typically everybody takes that sophomore slump, that step back in year 2. That's just the natural regression, but the natural progression, if you're going to take that next step, is in year 3. So John Miller to me is a name, and Vlad Ducasse that I think we definitely have to sort of look at as a camp battle and something to keep your eye on.
So you have him battling at guard then, Ducasse and Miller. You have those two battling at guard. Okay,
right
Dan, we'll start with Kevin here. Kevin, do you agree with that? Do you think that Miller is – I think there's definitely competition. It's good to have competition. I thought Miller may have been the most consistent offensive lineman last year. So I think it's his position to lose, and I think it's quite far. But where are you on Miller, Ducasse, and maybe even Ducasse, being a swing tackle or playing right tackle if they really need him. So where are you on him?
Yeah, we talked a little bit with Cole and his perspective from an outsider's view, and he has our offensive line ranked really high, especially he loves Deion Dawkins, especially with the addition of Deion Dawkins. That can be a real versatile guy that can play a couple of these positions as well, and I think he factors into right tackle, right guard. He can play wherever if there's injuries. Leading us to Ducasse, I do think that familiarity with Juan Castillo plays a role in why he maybe is getting some early snaps. But that progression that John Miller made from an awful rookie year, and I was really hard on him as a rookie. I didn't think he deserved to be in the lineup for most of the games that he's playing in. But he played like 98% of the snaps last year, I believe I read.
Yeah.
And John Miller made that big step up to a positive ranking, and I think he was the best improved guard in the league last year.
He was. Pro Football Focus loves him as an individual player, and you're right. That first year he struggled, and a lot of that had to do with his footwork, and also because he was injured. So you could tell the difference in his power and drive blocking from year 1 to year 2, and having another year next to the guys on that offensive line definitely helped him in pass pro too. So I think he improved. The problem is, and you mentioned with Castillo, is obviously we're going to a newer system. Right. They're going to keep some of the same stuff from last year, but overall it's going to be a change for Miller. So how can he adjust? His ability to adjust to this system, to these schemes, to these concepts is going to be something to watch definitely this year.
Absolutely.
Dan, where are you on the Ducasse? What do you think? What role do you think he has on this team? Do you think he's going to be competing at guard, at tackle? You think he could bump Mills off competition at tackle? Where are you on him?
So I think that Ducasse is the classic familiarity player that the coaches like to bring in. TJ Yates is another example that this staff is bringing in, as they've been through this scheme already. They're the person that's going to be leaned on for most of training camp to kind of set the tone until the main starters can kind of pick this up. I'm not sure I buy that he's going to threaten John Miller for the job, but we've seen coaching staffs make odd decisions, or maybe Ducasse really will be more familiar with this system.
Right.
So we'll get kind of a sense. What I do like about the offensive line groupings that they've had, we touched on how Deion Dawkins, who's coming in, has experience at both tackle spots, both guard spots. They have him working left tackle during OTAs because Cordy Glenn was injured. And there's this expectation that he's going to take over at right tackle at some point soon in his career.
Right.
And I think that that's a good thing. I also like that John Miller has experience working left and right side because he comes from Louisville offense that kind of does a strong side, weak side guard.
Right.
So he has his own experience flip-flopping. And I think that kind of bodes well when we're thinking about Richie Incognito's probably only got another year or so left with the Bills.
Right.
And then he's either out or retiring. So they're pretty well set up for whatever, however they want to scheme this offensive line moving forward.
Can't forget Groy either, Eric. I mean,
Yeah, that's what.
Oh yeah.
But
His offensive line is amazing. I mean, it's starting wise and depth wise. Kevin, I think you said it. I think this offensive line is not appreciated enough because we have great starters and then we have some supreme depth that probably rivals anyone in the league, right, Kevin?
we've never had it either. I mean, if you look at it, Ryan Groy's considered a starter by most accounts. I mean, he's paid like one. He's paid to start, I believe. His tender that we ended up taking from the Rams is a big one. I mean, he's being paid to play snaps this year, and he's our key depth. And I think that we would find a spot for him in 4 spots if injuries happen. Ryan Groy, I think, is as good as a backup offensive lineman gets. Doug Whaley left us in great shape at the offensive line grouping. That is one that he did. We are blessed to still have, and I do think it's as deep as any. I'm used to like having Colin Brown as our backup guard, and these units are 10 times better since I've been covering the Bills since about 06 and 07. These this backup offensive line group, if you put 5 together, is almost as good as some starting units we had under Dick Duran and Jen Gailey. So I think it's as good as any in the league, especially with the depth. If something happens, let's say to John Miller, I don't think it's devastating like it used to be for us if we lost one of our 2 or 3 guys.
Yeah, that's what's great about Groy. I think he has enough athleticism to play in his own blocking scheme, but he has also power. And I was impressed with him the most, obviously in space, but mostly in his pass protection. Because one thing with Eric Wood that we've seen over the years, he's a smart guy and a great leader, and he's a great player. Honestly, he's a center that's underrated by most Bills fans. But what I liked about Groy more than Wood is his ability to anchor versus the pass. A lot of times Eric Wood struggles with that bull rush, that big nose tackle that we have, any nose tackle basically that the Patriots throw out there and put over Eric Wood, he's going to struggle. But when it comes to versatility and getting in space in the run game and whatnot, Eric Wood is that guy and he's that leader and that smart, intelligent guy you need at center. Don't get me wrong. And I think he should start. But I do like Groy's long-term outlook because of his ability in pass pro to anchor down against those big pass rushers. So, Nate, what's the next position? What do you want to talk about next? Because Nate's primer is going to drop on cover 1 this week. It's probably going to drop either tomorrow or Tuesday, so be on the lookout for that. So, Nate, what's the next position, bro?
Before I go on, I have to just give you this 2 cents about the offensive line because it is super interesting group this year. The idea that Richie Incognito may or may not be around for that much longer, I think is an interesting point because I do think he has a lot left in the tank, and I think he would have something to say about whether or not he might be retiring in a year or 2. I think I
don't want to say that to his face. Right, I don't want to bring that up with him.
I might not send him a link to this either.
Right,
so.
Exactly. No, I think he might have something to say about that. But in terms of the future, I think that there's likely going to be a decision next season based on whether they keep Incognito or Wood. I think it's going to be one or the other on those guys because in terms of veteran dollars, some of the other depth that they have in the team, I think there's a really good opportunity that might even see Eric Wood make a transition from center to guard for sort of the end of his career while letting Groy sort of groom and take over as that long-term center option and sort of have him be the anchor of your offensive line moving forward. I think it's just in terms of responsibility and in terms of as players sort of age and I think he would still be good enough to be a good starter in this league, Eric Wood, and he's played the guard position before. So that was just an interesting thought I had about, especially because you said with Groy, I think his future really it projects well. I'm excited that they kept him around. I thought that they should have maybe tendered him for more. But I'm glad that LA decided to lowball it and really gave the Bills an opportunity to match that because I think he's a huge key moving forward.
Definitely. So that's a good wrap up to that segment as far as the offensive line goes. So what's another position? What's another topic that we should look for, Nate, that you're going to be dropping on your camp primer?
Well, I mean, there's quite a lot, but the linebacker position too, I think is maybe the most intriguing. I don't want to even say battle, but just intriguing position of all training camp. And I talked about this a little bit yesterday. I had Ryan Lasel and Icy Vic on with me from Rochester Sports Network. They came on, and what we got, the conversation we started to have about the linebacker position, maybe for the first time, I got really interested in maybe the versatility. Not only that, I don't really think the players bring you as much versatility, but I think that the skill set that they bring offers Sean McDermott a real, and Leslie Frazier, of course, a real opportunity to get creative with what they're going to do and how they're going to attack offenses. Because I think right now that they have three separate linebacking cores. I think they have like a first down linebacking core with Ragland, Hodges, and Preston Brown. Then they have more of a second down look where you get a little bit more versatile. Maybe you take out Preston Brown and you bring in a guy like Moan Humber, who's a little bit more versatile against the pass, and you can trust him a little bit more, I think, in the open field. And then on third down, I think that maybe that's where you get the most creative. You can get a guy like Hyde down in the box, and you can get Hodges on the field. I think right now, looking at this group of linebackers, Hodges is, to me, I think the most talented. I think he has the best ability to maybe be the best game-changing linebacker, or the kind of guy that can be trusted on from 1 to third down, where I just don't know what you have in Reggie Ragland yet. He really was a better fit for the 3-4. He's moving into a position where I kind of look back in the Jim Schwartz era and think of Brandon Spikes, and maybe why they were so good against the run that year is because they had just what I said, that sort of rotation of 2 or 3 different types of linebacking, quote-unquote cores, I guess, but different packages. I think this year is going to be what you see to sort of hide the fact that they don't have a Luke Kuechly, to hide the fact that they don't have a guy that can go sideline to sidelines on first down, second down, and third down. And I think until they get that, McDermott's going to have to get pretty creative in bringing in different personnel packages. I'm trying to maybe create mismatches, or in his case, avoid getting mismatches created on him by the opposing offenses. And I think just with where the NFL is going, you play the Patriots twice a year. They're a short, precise passing game, and they're comfortable taking 3, 4, and 5 yard hits. You need to have linebackers, you need to have guys in coverage that can cover those smaller, precise route runners. And I just don't know if they have that at the linebacker position right now. So in the meantime, I think McDermott for this year is going to have to get really creative on how he uses the sort of mismatch. And I didn't even mention Lorenzo Alexander in that group. So again, this is just a group of sort of guys that they're going to have to get very creative with in terms of how they use them, when they use them, and who they use them against.
All right, that's a good point. So let's start off with this, Nate. Who are your starting linebackers as of right now?
I think it's got to be Ragland at the mic. I think he's going to end up being your middle linebacker. I just think his downhill presence, I've seen you break down film on him. I've seen film on him. His downhill presence, I think, is going to lend well to what they want, at least in a Mike linebacker. At Sam, this is maybe where I'm most torn. I do think that they figure out a way to transition Preston Brown into that position and have him play it at least on first and second down. I think in terms of when you're looking at Brown versus Lorenzo Alexander, I just think and I don't even know if Lorenzo can play the strong or the weak. That's the thing, is I don't know where Lorenzo fits in necessarily in this defense right now. But when they brought in Hodges, I think he's your locked in weak side linebacker. I just think he's your lock. I think he has to be, unless Ramon Humber can come in and show that he can hold up against big guys, because that's really the concern, is can he hold up against run blocking? Because I think he's shown he's at least a versatile athlete at the very least. I think he's maybe your most athletic linebacker, but can he withstand some of the bigger guys that he's going to go up against? And we don't know that question, because he's really been mostly a special teams player.
All right, Kev, where are you on the starting linebacker course? It's something we've kind of touched upon in the past, but where are you? Do you agree with that lineup? We're starting, we'll do the base defense, 4-3 defense. Where Absolutely. Are you on the linebacking crew?
I mean, I might like our linebacking core a little more than even Nate does. I actually think it's a progression, and it's a step up from what we were putting on the field last year post Reggie Ragland injury. I thought besides Zach Brown, Preston Brown did not play very well in his roles and his fits. I really don't think that unit was very good at all. I do think that this is a major step up. I do think the Will addition of Gerald Hodges at a vet minimum, by the way, was a steal. I mean, that's a killer contract. That is a killer addition for what he's going to bring for his dollar amount. If we were playing baseball or Moneyball, his WAR would be remarkable. I mean, just his value and what he's going to do on the field, I think he's going to play 70% of the snaps. I think you can fit him in a lot of different packages. And we haven't even touched on Matt Milano, who I think could be potentially our big nickel player. He can play in a lot of sub packages. Yep. He can drop in like Hyde can, and I really think that adds, like Nate said, we have 3 different groupings. You know, we didn't even touch on potential the pass coverage option of having like Matt Milano on the field, Gerald Hodges potentially on the field, Tanner Vallejo. I mean, you have some options there that the unit's a lot better than last year, and it struggled. Look, I mean, Jay Ajayi broke like 57 tackles on us over 2 games. I mean, this unit is a strong progression, and I know there's not like a stud on paper, but that goes back to Cole and I speaking and him basically saying, look, I think Ragland came back to form. I think he's going to be a huge addition for you guys and can maybe even step into like a Keek League role, maybe not as athletic, but he can play that same type of role for you. So it is interesting to hear an outsider's perspective.
Yeah.
Someone who has no dog in the fight basically saying, you know, if Ragland comes to form, I do think your linebacking core could potentially be one of the top end ones in the league, especially with how much depth you have there. I don't think we're lacking depth at that position. Could we use another really solid top 10 PFF guy? Yeah. Is it lacking depth? No. I think there's a lot of different ways you go with that unit, especially with Lorenzo Alexander, who thinks he's going to play strong side linebacker, and I think he can.
He's Sam. I mean, I know it was OTAs and all that, but he's definitely a Sam in my book. Dan, where are you on this linebacking crew?
So I have to agree with the others so far. I think that Reggie Ragland's going to work his way into a starting job. I think Preston Brown is going to come back. The coaches might look at his film from last year and kind of toss it about and just kind of look at his fit, but I still think that he finds his way into a starting job as well. And it just makes too much sense for Gerald Hodges, given the roles that he's played at this point in his career. I think he makes so much sense coming in as the will. You have Lorenzo as the Sam coming in on passing plays and bringing the extra pass rush. Right. What I think might be interesting is what you think about when the Bills have to go into a nickel, and if they're in like a 4-2-5 look, who's dropping out to make up for it. Kevin brought up that you could maybe have Matt Milano come in, and he's technically a linebacker, but he could be your big nickel guy. But I wonder if you have to sit one of them, who's sitting out of Ragland or Brown or Hodges.
Right, and that's a great point. And Nate, you let us off with, by saying that it's going to be a personnel thing. It's going to be a coach's job. It's going to be up to them to match personnel, and that's just the way it is. Because why? Because these linebackers, as good as they are in their own rights and skills that they bring on the field, they're not complete players. And there's a reason why we brought in, guys like Hodges, because we need to be able to match up, not just within our division, but across the NFL. You bring in Hodges. I like him. I think he does stay on the field in third down situations, in nickel situations. I think Ragland can hold down the mic in nickel situations. There are ways to scheme that up, put him as a rat defender. And I know I was tough on Ragland coming out of college. I thought that his biggest drawback, obviously his weakness was, playing coverage, and it was just coverage. And everyone knows that he's not a straight line speed guy. He's a guy that's just going to get downhill and like Nate said, a Brandon Spikes type player. I think that they can cover it up, though. I think this scheme can cover it up, especially with another position that maybe we could touch upon is the defensive backs. I think there's a lot of versatility in that back end, too, where McDermott and Frazier can scheme up the secondary, scheme up these coverages to mask some of the lack of coverage in the second level linebacker crew.
And, I think you're really starting to get the feel of how a McDermott team is going to be built and how he figures he can win without a quarterback right now. And what I find most interesting is really over the past few years, the Bills have predicated on their players to be versatile. They could play multiple positions, the Manny Lawsons of the world, the guys that can play 3-4 different positions and then move to a different scheme and play a couple different positions. They don't have that this year. What they have is a ton of depth guys. They've got a ton of guys that do their own thing really good. And instead of being versatile players, they're offering their scheme versatility. And what I mean by that is they could, in one game, Preston Brown might have 60 snaps. In the next week against different personnel, he might only have 25. And I think that's what you're going to see this year is sort of a collective effort because, as Kevin said, there is no top dog. There's no guy that's showing up on the top 10 of your Pro Football Focus list. Just they don't have that guy this year, but what they do have is sort of a cast of guys that play different roles. And if they're willing to sort of accept that, and I think the same goes for the defensive backs, as you mentioned.
Mm-hmm.
I think if everybody's sort of willing to accept their role and being a guy that might play 60 snaps or that might play 20 snaps, depending on the personnel that the offense is throwing out, I just think what this defense is so much different than what it's been, in that they don't have a ton of versatile guys. I think really the only versatile guy you put on this field right now is Micah Hyde. He's the only guy that can really sort of move positions around. Instead, now at the defensive tackle position, you got 3 different guys who do 3 different things.
Right.
And I think it's a unique way that I don't think maybe people have looked at how this team's been built, but it's a far cry from what they've done really for the past little while, that at least that I can remember.
Yeah, and this scheme, it lends to that. You could have all the talent on your defense in the world, but if they're not used correctly, if they don't know their role in a specific play and a specific concept, it all means nothing. So to Nate's point, we have a bunch of guys that do certain things really well. Well, it's up to the staff to put them in those situations, right, Dan?
Yeah, exactly. I think, and you see that with the defensive backs too. We have everything from, we have like a 6'2" guy in Greg Mabin, who's an undrafted rookie. And we also brought in a 5'10", 175-pound undrafted rookie with Marcus Sales.
I love him.
He's going to be a monster on special teams. He's going to be fun to watch. But we have really the full range of shapes and sizes in the secondary.
Definitely, Kevin. So what's your thoughts on the secondary? Is there a guy maybe that you're looking forward to watch in camp come tomorrow?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, one guy, we've mentioned a lot of players familiar with the scheme, right? And one, we have a real good example on our defensive backfield, and it's Leonard Johnson. He's a guy that came in right off of McDermott's defenses. He's going to mix right in with Leslie Frazier, similar to a Sharice Wright. However, I think Leonard Johnson was getting a majority of the nickel snaps, a guy that is going to play nickel and dime. He's going to really know the defense right away, and I think you're going to see a lot of early plays from him just due to his familiarity with the defense. So he's one of the guys I'm looking for. I really like some of the depth players we have, and Leonard Johnson's going to be one of them.
Yeah, and I brought up his stats on Pro Football Focus, and I think you make a great point, Kevin, because, they brought Hyde in, and Hyde played that nickel role, primarily with the Green Bay and Green Bay's defense last year. So through OTAs, what McDermott had said is that, we're going to start him at safety, and then we'll work him into the nickel role and mismatch and personnel-wise. But I do think you have a great point with Leonard Johnson. He's a guy that has played that role. So to ease that transition while Hyde gets used to playing in space with everything in front of him back as a safety, as a pure safety, I do think Johnson has a chance to, come up and make a name for himself, as with all the defensive backs on this roster. Because even a guy like Trey White, I could see him bumping down into nickel sometimes. And Ronald Darby, we play the Patriots, Ronald Darby in the slot with his tackling ability and his mental toughness and physicality from the nickel position, he'd be a really good candidate to bump down sometimes too. So,
absolutely.
I do think that Leonard Johnson is a guy to watch come camp, and he's getting a shot now because, he wasn't a starter in Carolina in this defense, so he's getting another shot, and this may be his last.
Yeah, and don't forget Kevon Seymour, pretty much one of the best limited playing time, but one of the best rookies graded out by PFF. And
right.
I don't see how you keep him off the field too. So I do think there's like we saw at linebacker, like we maybe see a little at receiver potentially if a Boldin signing happens. You have the same versatility at cornerback position. We have different groupings with everyone playing kind of what they're best at. So Kevon Seymour is another one who could come in right away and make an impact, him versus Leonard Johnson. So I do think there's some pieces at the cornerback spot. It's just safety we're going to need to be careful with.
Mm-hmm. Definitely the position to watch. But with that all said, we're going to wrap it up here, keep it nice and short for the most part on covering the podcast. A few announcements, and we'll go around the table where we can find everyone's work. But obviously, keep an eye out for Grandstand Sports Network. It is launching this week. So be on the lookout for that. Again, we're going to have 13 podcasts and brands that are going to be covering everything from the NFL to NHL, fantasy football, a little bit of everything. So be on the lookout for that. And not just at the website, you're going to be able to listen to this stuff live. You're going to be able to, click a button, or you're going to come to the website. You'll be able to click a button and listen right away. There'll be a schedule out every day. We have radio programmers. Chris from the Rock Pile Report is going to be putting together the schedule. And Corey Reed from the Sports Monarchy, they're working on the radio station, getting everything set up for this launch. We're all really excited to, collaborate amongst each other instead of competing against each other. Because guess what? We all have the same thing. We all want the same thing. We want sports. We want it all the time. So be on the lookout for Grandstand Sports Network, the best view in sports. So we'll start, Dan. What do you got coming out this week, with Buffalo Rumblings and even maybe with Cover One, if you got something to reveal?
Sure. So for Buffalo Rumblings this week, I'm going to be breaking down a passing play from the West Coast offense. I've been doing a series for the last couple weeks where we're kind of looking at the X's and O's of Buffalo's playbooks. So we've covered outside zone, we've covered inside zone runs. This week, I think we'll take a look at a West Coast passing play. I've also got a breakdown for Lavon Coleman, running back from Washington. I'll be dropping that on to Cover One this week.
Sweet.
So look for that.
Okay, now throw out your Twitter handle where everyone can follow. We need to get your followers up, brother.
Sure thing. So you can follow me at danrlavoie at twitter.com.
All right, and I'll definitely post a link for that and on YouTube and whatnot. And when this podcast does come out, you'll be able to find him easily. I make that easy for everyone. Kev, I know you're going to be handling the podcast. Once the season starts, man, Kevin's going to be the go-to guy for the podcast, the Cover One podcast. So if you got questions, you need something answered, you want him to cover a topic for the week, he's the guy to hit. You need to hit up. And Kev, where can they find you?
Absolutely. As always, you can find me at Kevin Massare. I'm pretty vocal on Twitter. You'll see my takes there. And once, like Erik said, running that podcast, pretty much getting guests, getting new thoughts. And like we had last week, trying to get on people who have an unbiased opinion, not negative, not positive, someone that can give us a really opinion-based information that isn't just going to have something that is going to be biased. I like that. I like having unbiased people on our show. Outside of that, I'm going to be at camp as much as possible, so I'll be live tweeting that. Erik and I will work out some type of, see how we can get some audio from there if possible. Sure. So you'll see me in and out camp, and I'll be around, and I know I see a lot of you guys there, so look forward to it. Awesome.
Nate, what you got, man? What you got on docket this week? Where do I begin?
Well, it's training camp week, or as I call it, the perfect storm. So this week starts really the busy season for me. It starts the real working season. I love it. It's the best part of the year, best time of the year, and maybe training camp's the best part. So I will be at training camp every night practice, every weekend practice, and any practice that is up at New Era Field on the practice fields up there. So Thursday night, opening night, 5:30, I will be there. We will be doing some live. I believe we're going to do some periscoping right from from the Cover One Twitter page. So once we'll get some live reaction from players after the first practice, and then I'll be hosting live Saturdays and Sundays on WGR live from training camp following practices. Most of the weekend practices are those early 8 a.m. practices. So I'll be up doing that.
You're in for it, man. You're in for the haul.
And after that, I got that camp primer that should be coming out either tomorrow evening or Tuesday. That'll kind of go through a lot of what we talked about today as well, because as I mentioned beforehand, I knew we were going to get out some good names that we wanted to get through to. And so I'm glad we were able to kind of hash this out today. But yeah, we've got a lot of stuff going on. I'm excited. Camp's getting ready to roll. And I think the content this year, if we can only coincide with wins, I think it's going to be a great year for content, for people having choices this year. I think maybe this year, 2017 football season is maybe a Bills fan's dream in terms of content. There's better places to get it now. You don't just have to go to one place. You don't just have to go to the Buffalo News. You don't just have to go to WGR. You don't just have to go one place. Right. This year, I think maybe we've selected and sort of assembled the most versatile group of talking heads you could really get. So I'm excited to get going.
Yes, and it's all going to be quality content. We take pride in that. If you guys been following us at Cover One, that's number one when it comes to us. We want good quality content. And, there's a reason why, I brought all of these guys on, and there's a reason why I brought, all these guys onto Grandstand, because it's quality content, knowledge, and, we're covering everything. So thanks for tuning in this week, and we'll be back next week, and maybe even hear some content during the week as far as camp goes when news pops up. So stay tuned.